Greetings programs and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4 for a quick follow-up on my Man the Guns video. This is to cover a mod that basically takes what Man the Guns introduced and greatly expands on it. So this is the Naval Rework mod, which actually popped up relatively quickly after Man the Guns came out. And if you're not a fan of the entire ship design system as it is at the moment, then you will probably absolutely want to avoid this mod because it takes that and expands upon it greatly. And it's mostly been an enjoyable experience trying out this mod, but it's also been a bit tedious, especially when it comes to certain important things that you need to update on your ships, and then you end up having to update them across all of your designs at the point where you've gotten the technology, and that becomes a bit of a pain. But that's not really that different from the base game. Stuff like radar or improved hydrophones, you have to go through your designs and do those anyway in the base game. It's just there's a little bit more of that in this mod. So what I'm going to do is basically just pick a country, let's go for Australia, that starts off with a dockyard. At least we need at least a single dockyard to be able to look at the designer side of things. Although very first of all we're going to use the console command and hope this works. There we go, research all. So this is a mod in two parts almost. It's a vastly increased range of technology options, an almost perhaps overwhelming increase in technology options, but it does give you a lot more flexibility in your actual designing of new ships, because it also expands the amount of modules and the way that you can design your ship, so you can actually have closer to real world designs if you like. I should point out, most of these are fairly realistic, you know, like advanced dual-purpose guns. You can get dual-purpose guns of different calibers. You've got various upgrades on like main batteries, so like you can have up to 6-inch dual-purpose guns there. You can have, that's your heavy cruiser guns. You've got your light batteries are kind of on this side of things, and then you've got more of your battleship caliber guns, your super heavy battleship caliber guns. These are the 18-inch guns, so if you want to build a Yamato, you go for this. And then it has the completely silly upgrade option of 508mm guns, which would be, what, 20 inches? 21 inches? I have no idea offhand, but stupidly big guns. You can have ships with extremely big guns if you want. So that can be a little overwhelming at first anyway, but if you have an idea of what you particularly want to go for, like for instance if you just want to concentrate on submarines, you can just go for those technologies, and it's much less to deal with than going for all these. But if you're trying to, like if you're playing as the Royal Navy for instance, or playing as Great Britain and controlling the Royal Navy, or Japan or America, one of the major powers that really does need to go for naval stuff, then yeah, you're going to be having to put a lot more research time into some of these, and so maybe the actual research time on some of these could have been reduced just because there's so many new technologies. But if you have enough research slots, it's maybe not that much of an issue. But yeah, the test game I did, I was basically like I did with the Man the Guns game I showed you, where I was playing as Ireland. I neglected a lot of other technologies just to concentrate on the naval stuff. So let's look at the actual ship designer, and yeah, it gives you lots of new options. So just right away it gives you an increased number of templates. So for example, with submarines, you actually have, for every submarine hull, you get a kind of tiddly little very cheap inshore coastal submarine design, which can have a limited amount of equipment on it. You get a kind of standard size of submarine hull, and then you get a long-range cruiser submarine hull, which is going to be a bit less stealthy perhaps, but will have a vastly increased range. So you've got better templates to match what your kind of base requirements are, and then within that, well, let's just stick with submarines. Let's have a look at the cruiser submarine hull, and we get this increase of the amount of modules and slots available. Now, one very nice thing that this mod does do that I wish the base game did a lot better is in terms of manpower requirements. Even just for a submarine in the base game, you need, I think, 200 manpower. And it's not entirely clear if that's supposed to be on the sub, which would be absolutely ridiculous for a World War II era sub, or if that somehow is meant to represent the onshore support staff. And it's how it works with air wings. When you create an air wing, it requires maybe several thousand personnel, but that represents, you know, ground crews, maintenance, and all the rest of it. But for naval stuff, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to do it in exactly the same way. I suspect the base game naval requirements are kind of done in that same way. It's supposed to represent not just the crew on the ship. But in that case, surely it would be much more logical if when you build air bases and naval bases, those come with some kind of manpower requirement instead of foisting it all on the actual ship design kind of things, side of things. And I rather pointed this out when I was particularly talking about trying to make an escort carrier, because you can make carriers with a small air wing in Man the Guns, but they will still have a stupidly high manpower requirement for the actual size of the ship. This is a lot more realistic. It bases the manpower requirements, well, I mean, the hulls themselves have a certain base level of manpower requirement. In this case, it's only 15, but as you add modules, it will increase the manpower requirement. And so if we just put all of the, let's say we want an extreme long range, which will actually decrease the amount of ultimate speed we can get on this, but we'll just put all of the advanced everything on it and all the best torpedoes and just make the most expensive, most capable submarine that we can. Heavy anti-aircraft guns, why not? Let's put on a cruiser-sized deck gun, because why not? Radar, snorkel, and let's have mine lane gear as well. Let's just, in fact, no, let's go mad, have a float plane launcher. So this is going to be not a very fast submarine, even with the best possible engine. Actually, one of the nice things with the engine upgrades is that you don't necessarily get more powerful engines as you go through the engine technologies. It's just they get more efficient, they get more reliable. So, you know, your fuel usage will go down. So we end up with, because this is basically like a Japanese I-400 class or whatever, a manpower requirement of 115. But if you take away some of these things, especially the float plane, you start getting down to a much more realistic, you know, 60, 70, 80 personnel required for a submarine rather than the 200 that the base game insists that you need. So that's a really nice system. And this whole way of adding different things in, like your cruising range and the different, if we look at, say, Battleship as a counterpoint to that, you can really customize and go for designs that are much more based on real-world designs than you can in the base game, where everything is a lot more abstracted. And it's just, oh, the level 1 guns are better than the level 2 guns. Well, no, in this case, you are not only choosing the caliber of the guns, but you're choosing the turret configuration and how many of the guns that you have. So let's design a battleship. And let's say we want to have, this isn't going to be quite so mad. We're not going to be sending this out to the middle of the ocean, so let's go for a medium cruising range. And we won't do the engine yet. I've been typically leaving the engine till last, because you want to put everything that you want to put on first, and then you put on the engine, because you don't necessarily want half of your ships being able to do 36 knots and the other half only being able to do 25 knots. You want to kind of try and unify things a bit, and I've generally been going for 32 knot designs. But let's go for a completely mad design, which is never ever even going to get over 30 knots probably. So we'll go for 152mm dual purpose batteries, and you can actually get much better anti-air designs in this game than with the base ships, because you've got a secondary slot and then you've got like a dual purpose battery slot that's specifically for that. In fact, we can actually go for... oh, that's the wrong slot. That's the secondary slot. Is it the high angle battery slot, I think? Yeah, you can get more of them. I think they're less effective as secondary guns, but yeah, so you can have bigger dual purpose guns, but you can also have high angle battery guns, which are up to 127 mil at most. So they're less effective as secondary dual purpose guns, but they give you a bit more AA power. So let's do that. Let's have better AA power. And let's not touch the good stuff yet. Let's leave the battery until almost last. So let's do all the rest of it. Advanced search radar and float plane catapult, because why not? All of the torpedo launchers, we're just going to go mad. Heavy torpedo launchers. Was that the same ones? Not that it matters, it's fine. We've got a mixed armament of... yeah, this is a completely stupid battleship design, but anyway. So yeah, I've got a torpedo battleship so far. Doesn't actually have any main guns. I don't even think this would let me save the design, because you need to have a main battery on this sort of ship. But then we get to the main guns, and we can go, right, what kind of layout do I have? Now, some of them, in terms of the actual, like, a 10-gun layout that's 2 quads and 1 twin, or 2 triples and 2 twins, or 4 triples, or you can have 3 quads. In terms of the actual firepower output, that's a bit unnecessary. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. That's purely cosmetic. So if I wanted to go for what is that, 10 gun, 406 mil, so 16-inch guns, 10 guns, and I choose one of the other 10 gun options, which will be, was that one? That would be that one. So that should, in theory, why is that making a difference to the heavy piercing? Should, in theory, make no difference, but apparently it does. Hang on. The heavy attack is the same, but the piercing is different. I don't know why that's different. Okay, apparently I might be wrong about that. It shouldn't make any difference because it's the same number of... that might be a bug. That might actually be a glitch. It's the same number of barrels. I don't know why it would change the piercing attack value when it's the same number of barrels. Unless there's some bit of the deeper game mechanics I'm not understanding there. But anyway. So I can do that. Or I can be completely mad and have, let's say, 3x quad. And sadly, this means you can't have a kind of modernised HMS Agincourt if you wanted that. The most you can have is 12 main guns. But if I wanted to have the biggest possible battery size, which would give me an absolutely insane amount of heavy attack value. And at that point, we're starting to think about putting the engine on, and we're going to discover that it's probably going to be hideously slow, even with the best possible engine. Well, that's actually not too bad. 24 knots. I was expecting it to be slower than that. I was thinking this might be a 20-knot battleship. But yeah, this is even more mad than the Yamato in terms of the armour and the rest of it. If, however, you wanted to make a much faster ship, we can do that. We can basically... oh, I could have just hit the reset button. That would have been quicker. If I want to go for a battle cruiser and basically just to go for the minimum possible armour, I could make far cheaper. Let's say we give it Dunkirk's guns. Now, the one thing this system won't quite let you do is an all-forward design, but you can kind of imagine in your head that you've built an all-forward design, even if it doesn't actually show up on the designer. In fact, realistically, the all-forward turret design would be maybe somewhere in the armor layout module, because it would reduce end up in a reduce-sized citadel. Because that was the idea behind having the Nelson class ships, was you had a shorter overall needed length of citadel armour, which then translated to weight savings, which mattered, of course, because it was designed under one of the... was it the London Naval Treaty? I can't remember. Or was it the Washington? I can never remember which one came first. But anyway, that isn't really a thing you can do even with this mod, sadly. So let's go for a smaller, let's go for like the, I don't know, just kind of go for smaller everything, see how fast we can make this ship. And let's still give it a float plane and maybe 1 or 2 AA guns, but let's see what that could be speed-wise. 41 knots, so I can have a 41 knot, extremely fast but not particularly heavily armed battleship. And you could in theory make that a kind of surface raider battleship, but practically speaking the actual cost of it is going to limit that rather badly. And actually that's even only with the short range, so you start bumping that up a bit. And yeah, 38 knots is still pretty damn fast for a battleship, but it's not really practical. So you can make completely impractical designs, but there's a lot of stuff in between, of course. So yeah, overall I rather like it. The main thing where it gets tedious is that because you've got all of these extra techs and all of these extra slots, and this is really a fault of Man the Guns as well, but it's expanded and expounded upon with the addition of all the stuff that this mod adds, is that when you start having to do things like upgrading radar, hydro, upgrading your torpedo types, maybe you want to upgrade your engines, it starts to get expensive in terms of refit time, but also it gets really tedious going back through all of your existing designs and adding your better fire control and adding your better hydro and all the rest of it. So that's not exclusive to this, that's a problem with Man the Guns as well, but it's so much worse in that regard because it has all that extra stuff. It's a lot more fiddly. So if you really didn't like how the ship design stuff works with Man the Guns, you are not going to like this mod, but I kind of do. It's just, I can't imagine ever playing it in multiplayer because you'd have to spend that much extra time designing all your ships. And you would need that much extra XP to do it as well. It does, however, maybe let you specialise a little bit better than Man the Guns, but in practical terms, not really. In Man the Guns, you can still build your destroyer leader, fast, lightly armoured cruisers, you can still build spotter cruisers, you can still build basically most types of things that you can build in this, with the exception really of carriers. I think carriers is where this really does pull ahead of the base Man the Guns DLC, just because you have that many more options. With you can have, you know, your armored carrier, you can have a proper actual escort carrier, you can have you can almost have the kind of like literally a bow class that's slow that just attaches to your convoy escorts. That would be actually really cheap. In fact, let's have a go at doing that now. Let's see. Let's give it a long cruising range, and we'll give it some minimum of armor. We're not going to make it totally unarmored. So this is going to be enclosed hangar is just kind of like the standard medium size. You've got armored hangar. And then open hangar, and actually the very smallest we can do is, oh, that's because I'm looking at the big fleet carrier hull when I should be looking at the light carrier hull. Yeah, whoops. That would obviously make a difference. So yeah, let's do the same thing again. And this isn't exactly a bogue I'm going for, but let's say I want an open hangar. So this is going to be an unarmoured hangar deck. We'll give it some kind of minimum of AA defensiveness. It doesn't get secondaries as a slot, so that's fine. We'll give it modern radar. So that's an air wing of 24. This is actually even less manpower than a bogue, although we haven't put the engine on it yet. But let's say we want this to be let's say not quite as slow as the Bogue, but a 25 knot carrier. Can we even make it that slow? Right, the lightest possible engine, or the least powerful engine, we're still getting a 27 knot escort carrier. But this is about right in terms of in fact, even with if you made it an armoured hangar, you'd actually get a smaller deck size. But the armoured hangar is actually about you might as well use the armoured hangar over the enclosed hangar for this design. But you know, you can tweak the hangar size a bit and it'll affect the speed and the manpower requirements, but it's a proper escort carrier, and you just cannot do that in the base game. And it's actually quite cheap as well. That's not a lot of either manpower or production costs. This would take a relatively short amount of time to build. So yeah, overall, it doesn't necessarily add a huge amount of flexibility outside of carriers, but it does add a heck of a lot of flavour. It does add a heck of a lot of if you have some kind of interest in naval history stuff, it adds a heck of a lot of ability to add historical designs, or close to historical designs, far over and above what Man the Guns lets you do. So yeah, that's really about it for this mod. I just wanted to flag it up, and also this was a relatively nice quick video to sit down and record, which didn't hurt either. So yeah, you can find this on Steam. I don't doubt there's probably a forum thread for it on the Paradox forums as well, where you can go and read more or leave feedback or whatever. And if there is, I will link it down in the description below. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you found it interesting, and if you have, you can do all these usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.